It's 8 o'clock. Why don't we go ahead and get started? Welcome to everyone who's joining us for this MI10 Artificial Intelligence for Healthcare Leaders office hours. I'm Arlen Meyers. I'm the President and CEO of the Society of Physician Entrepreneurs and a member of the MI10 team. Let me just take a little bit of time. Anthony, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Anthony. I'm a practicing pediatric cardiologist with a data science AI background and an interest in entrepreneurship and global health.
Great. So this session, we've invited several very prominent, active participants in artificial intelligence in healthcare education. I've asked each of them just briefly to give us maybe a 1 or 2 sentence intro on their bio, where they are and what they do, and then just to discuss, again, a general overview of their AI and healthcare education initiatives. So Amy, why don't we start off with you and take it from here.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is Dr. Amy Bronson. I am a physician assistant by background and training, but I've been in higher education leadership for over 15 years. Predominantly worked in otolaryngology and facial plastic and reconstructive surgery. Still a clinician at heart, but love the power of education. I have really been looking for ways in which students can be prepared not only for healthcare today, but for healthcare of the future. And so I really feel like we're doing our practitioners a disservice if we're not giving them the tools to be ready and go tackle what's coming. And certainly that comes from a lot of critical thinking and the ability to navigate the new. But more importantly, it's giving them some of the tools of what they're going to face. So we have been really fortunate to partner with MI10 in being able to bring on a formal education and deploying that for our physician assistant program here at West Coast University. We're looking at that to be our pilot project, as when we look to extend that across West Coast so we can get a lot of interprofessional collaboration across all of the healthcare schools here at West Coast. What is that looking like? We really looked at, when we're going to do a pilot project, let's look at things that we're already doing that we can then bring AI into. So instead of doing a standalone course, a standalone certificate, we're really looking at putting that into our curriculum. A really good place that fit when doing a review of our learning outcomes was embedding that within our evidence-based medicine course, and then through our professional capstone series, really with kind of 3 goals in mind. Let's break down some walls of fear and misinformation and arm our students with some tools to better understand what AI is and what AI isn't. And then I think secondarily to that is developing curiosity and a hunger for AI. And we want students to be playing with it. We often talk about ponder, play, and then practice. And so that's really the theoretical underpinnings that we've brought to deploying this as first a pilot project and then beyond. And I'm sure we'll get into a lot more details of what that's looking like and what the curriculum is, and happy to answer those questions, but want to make sure I allow some time on the floor for our other great guests.
Great, thanks. I'm not sure whether you know, but I'm an ENT surgeon, so it's nice to have a kindred spirit on the call.
I am with you.
All right, so Rubin, you want to tell us what you're up to?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Rubin Pillay. I am also a physician. I'm based at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. I'm one of the assistant deans in the School of Medicine. But more importantly, I run the Heersink Institute for Biomedical Innovation. And this is where all our AI, education, training, and applied activities are seeded and based. So on the education front, we've been really focused to date on driving AI literacies, and we have a host. I worked with Anthony and Arlen on a lot of this. To set up a host of different AI programming that we have, both for credit bearing and non-credit bearing, and we're aggressively looking at how to start infusing AI in medical education. Of course, for everybody on the call, it's not easy because it's a highly regulated curriculum. So we're still kind of tampering with that. And I think it would be much easier for us to execute once we've socialized leaders on the importance of leveraging AI for education. So critical. One of the things we're doing in the Institute is using a parallel program that we have, a master's degree in healthcare innovation, to pilot a lot of the AI virtual realities education modalities. And I think when people see the potential, that they'll realize that the application in medicine. So I'll leave it there. I mean, I'm really grateful for this session, because I think it's part of this socialization process that's really critical. So thanks, Anthony. Thanks, Arlen. Thanks, Rebecca.
Sure. Gregg, you want to tell us a little bit about what you're up to?
So I trained at, I'm a DO, and I then went to Cincinnati Children's for my neonatology and my respiratory muscle physiology fellowship, and I was in practice. And so early on, I was interested in informatics. I think back in the day, I could build a 2-node neural network. There was like a little kit you could do. And then I said, I have no idea what I'm doing. But in 1988, we said, gee, we should have an electronic health record to run our newborn ICU. So I just built one. Not fancy. And eventually, a child of that was used for a national neonatology group that did about 20% of all the neonatology in the United States. And what I've been interested in is getting people on board to understand, back when I was a clinical neonatologist, when I was an addiction medicine doc, kind of understanding how to do better work by working together. And so, for instance, back in the day, I taught a course, what's this internet thing, at the American Academy of Pediatrics in the 80s. I saw how pediatrics used to be the leader in electronic health records and then just kind of got rolled over. I saw how business and medicine kind of caused some hiccups. In full disclosure, yes, I went with a private equity company and formed a national company, but I don't think that makes me a bad guy. And so when a lot of the informatics pieces came up, trying to get people on board for the tools. So in the American Academy of Pediatrics, I'm the section head for one of the larger sections with about 4,100 people. And we said, listen, AI is going to be, is last year, and people have no idea what they're doing. So what I did was I got together national, other people, and we started doing these basic webinars for pediatricians and covered some of the basic domains, really very popular pieces. My interests now are at the medical school and the GME piece. We just submitted, which is under second review, an article that was a survey of all the fully accredited DO colleges. So DOs are 30–40% of all the medical students. And to look at what the state is of their policies and their education for teachers, the educators and the students. And our comment to people is, it's not like you're trying to build a nuclear power plant. The teachers and the students, the clinicians, are playing with it. And the comment I heard a lot was, well, I used it. And I said, well, what does that mean? They said, well, I went on when I could sign up for ChatGPT for free, and I tried to do a couple of things, and it just doesn't work. So I think it's stupid. And I go, well, what are your students doing? And they said, well, oh, I'm sure they think it's stupid also. No one's using it. And so my interest is to help implement operational tools in these programs, both for the policy side and the education side, for the educators and the students. Areas that I'm interested in are the OSCEs. Now, I know there's a number of organizations working on that, but I'm as interested in the framework. So for instance, if you are doing, you're evaluating, you're the evaluator that's looking at the OSCE. Not only are you getting the OSCE information from the AI, but I would like to help the educator understand their feedback. And it links with a bunch of other work that I've done in the past. But mostly what I'm interested in is, at an institution level appropriately implementing tools that are going to not only prepare, as Amy said, them for the future, but to affect their work now.
Okay, great.
So that's really the part I'm interested in.
Yeah, great. David Dinan was going to join us, but it looks like he is not yet, if he is going to join us. And so we have a lot of high horsepower in the audience, Harvey Castro amongst others, so feel free to chime in. Let me just start things off with the panel, and that is the first question, which is, we've heard, I mean, Rubin, you've mentioned that it's a highly regulated, that is accredited, getting accreditation for certain curriculum, et cetera. Where do you see, how do you see us getting over that? Because those of us who have been in the trenches doing this, one of the primary objections we hear when we go to a medical school and say, hey, do you want to do this? Or are you interested in doing it? They say, well, we need to teach to the test and forget the rest. Because basically medical students, their first motivation is to pass all the tests so they can graduate. Part 1, Part 2, Part 3. Residents are generally interested in two things: getting board certified and finding a job. And the stuff doesn't get into the curriculum unless it is at least in part supplementing or meeting accreditation requirements, particularly in schools that actually have not yet been created but are on a white napkin at this point. And there's several schools, both allopathic and osteopathic. So, Rubin, let me start off with you. So how do you address that accreditation question?
I think there's two approaches, Arlen. You know, the real power in AI and digital is this ability to go directly to the market. And I think traditional thinking forces us to take a top-down approach. Let's start with, you know, medical school leaders or the regulatory folk and try and socialize and culturalize them. I fall on the spectrum of folk who let's go straight to the patients, let's go straight to the med students, let's go straight to the residents, and start, you know, working with them, making the products and services directly accessible to them, you know, and they can adopt this on a voluntary basis. But I think that's where the power is. You know, they could become very, very strong advocates for policy and regulatory environment change. You know, so that's what we're doing here. So, you know, I'm not constrained or saddled by adhering to any regulatory environment. I'm trying to get to the students and the residents directly, and trying to impress upon them the benefits of leveraging AI. You know, if you really want to do well and pass your boards or your exams, this is the way to do it. And you know, it gets a lot of buy-in that way. So I think that's, you know, we need a kind of dualistic approach to that. Having said that, I think forums like this and people like this have a key role to play in reshaping, you know, the regulatory and policy environment as well.
So, Amy, at your place, how are you addressing this accreditation question? And a second one is, not only are we using artificial intelligence to educate people, but we're using it to monitor their personal and professional development. So now, if you're going to take a board exam in otolaryngology, for example, you may be taking the board exam via an artificial intelligence engine, simulation, personalized learning, follow-up questions, deep analysis. We used to do the, you know, basically it was recall, interpretation, and problem solving. Now it's evolved into something much more sophisticated. It's credential-based board certification, which most people are not trained to do or measure. So where do you see this going at your place?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think I come at it with Rubin sort of an open mind to how do we think stay within the bounds, but think outside the box and how we can address some of these pieces. And I think part of it for us has been starting small. Let's take some small bite-sized pieces and doing a review and sort of an audit of the curriculum. Where are places where we can simultaneously be putting in some AI pieces alongside what we're already teaching? So it's not something that we're having to rethink, re-meet a different accreditation standard, but what can we just flow into the already existing curriculum? And that's been one way that we've been thinking outside the box and still meeting those accreditation standards. But I think to your point, Arlen, better preparing students for this competency-based education. How are students assessing, reassessing their knowledge and understanding while utilizing these tools that we haven't necessarily implemented, but they may be held accountable for when they get to the place of having to get ready for board certification exams. So I think it's twofold. I love to say education is advocacy because I think we are the ones, by putting it in our curriculum, by preparing our students and helping our students to also advocate for how important this is as a part of their education, is what influences some of that legislative work and certainly some of our accrediting bodies and their ability to want to listen to what the need is. Because I think sometimes we're behind in the legislation based on what our students are needing in real time.
Gary, there are about 33 to 37, I don't know, osteopathic medical schools in the United States now. And several of them, I think 8 or 9, are privately owned. From the osteopathic education perspective, are you seeing, compared to the allopathic schools, more receptiveness to curriculum reform, particularly as it applies to what we're talking about, or not?
So I've held the role of curriculum dean, clinical dean, senior associate dean. I was a reviewer for COCA, the DO accreditation place, so go out. There's about 65 sites, and I think there's about 50 schools that are in one form. And I think some of the things that are being done, like everywhere else, is a bit fluff. And that but I think you have to separate two things. What are we going to teach about digital medicine, and how are we going to use the tools in the curriculum? So it goes kind of what Amy was talking about. And I don't know that it's a conservative group. The very new schools, it's hard to tell. And I think we've increased the number of schools by 30% recently. So I don't know how to compare it, but there's really been no survey of the MD schools. We've done a survey of all the DO schools, and essentially no one is offering anything. No one has policies. No one's working on policies. No one has education. No one's working on education. And we touched base with about 80% of the fully accredited schools. So,
okay, so thank you. So there have been some recent scoping reviews addressing this issue of what are medical schools actually doing, and we can share those.
Right, but one thing, Arlen, what those scoping reviews talk about are places that have programs. It's not
right
at the other end of the funnel, which saying is, what is the environment out there? I've looked at it as the environment as opposed to Stanford has this and MIT has that. There's great programs, but I think the piece is, has it trickled down to the average program? And what is the content? Not at a certificate or a master's program, not as an implementation, as a digital piece. And I think that's where we have to work. It goes back to what Rubin says. It's like street organizing. Mm-hmm. You've got to figure out, I think, where the product market fit is. What are you coming to them with? Because there's so much opportunity. So in the DO world, I think there's a great deal of opportunity. And almost all the new schools are for profit.
Okay, so go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go on.
So this is now a time where you can pretty much, for the audience, to ask the panel anything. So if you have a question, either raise your hand or put it in the chat, particularly those of you who are at any stage of AI integration. into medical education. And when we say medical education, we mean professional schools, associate's degrees programs, PAs, those sorts of things. This is not just limited to doctors, pharmacists, etc. And let me just start off with Dr. Ang in Gary in Singapore. Can you give us some insight as to what's the perspective from your end of the world?
Currently, I'm working on responsible ethical use of AI. I'm the clinical advisor for my company to use AI in healthcare. We're very early. I think there's quite uncertain. We are a new setup unit. So from a single perspective, we are quite progressive in terms of the guidelines, but we don't have one that is specifically for healthcare industry. So that's where I'm working on. Yeah.
I see. So you represent a company that's doing this?
Well, with National Healthcare Group, so we're in charge of 1/3 of the Singapore population, the northern and the central part of Singapore. So in our country, we have this thing called the Verify AI. I think it's with IMDA, which is like a government body that does that. Yeah. So you can read more about AI Verify. Yeah.
Okay. So Dr. Haridas is a neurosurgeon in Los Angeles. Do you want to ask your question?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I thank you for inviting me to this group. Yeah, as a surgeon, obviously, I'm very focused on the actual skill of performing surgery, and that is something that artificial intelligence will eventually play a role. But I think we spend so much time in virtual reality, augmented reality. I wonder if people forget the sense of what reality is when they finish training. So I'm curious of how, as a surgeon, I can help my patients and students understand and really who's driving this content, who is verifying it, how does something get accredited? These are the kind of questions that come into my mind. Because I'm definitely interested in the educational space and bringing that to Los Angeles. So.
Right. So good question. And so Anthony, why don't you tackle that one? And oh, by the way, there's this issue of will surgeons lose their surgical skills in the environment of automation? This question comes up repeatedly in the aerospace and aviation industry. And there have been several examples recently where, frankly, the pilots just didn't override Google Maps and the planes wound up in the ocean. So maybe you can, Rubin or anybody else who wants to chime in. Anthony, why don't you just start off with the main question is, where do you see this going in the operating room, and when is enough enough?
Yeah, I think I'm in a very privileged position to have either given talks or interact quite a bit with various surgical subspecialties. So what I'm saying is different surgical subspecialties have different number and different kinds of champions for use of extended reality and AI in the operating room, going from the neurosurgeons and orthopedic surgeons using it for spine surgery with overlay of images onto the real anatomy to other surgical subspecialties using it for training. And as you can imagine, for certain subspecialties, using AI and training turn out to be superior to having senior mentors, only because humans have frailties like lack of patience and fatigue, which computers tend not to have. So I think it's been very different for each surgical subspecialty. I would say orthopedic surgery, neurosurgery, cardiac surgery have really, and plastic surgery now have really started to surge ahead. And it's not just in the operating room, as you well know, it's also pre-planning surgical procedures. I'm a cardiologist. I used to do some interventions. So it's just wonderful to pre-plan the procedure with 3D MRI and imaging before you go live in real time into the cath lab. So I think every subspecialty has adopted certain practices. And I think what we're seeing is once there's a really good use case or two, then all of a sudden everyone is populating that area. And I think for each surgical subspecialty, there's been a few use cases that has really accelerated the desire to learn about AI.
Sarthi, do you want to ask your?
Yeah, if I can just add, I think one of the dangers that we face is we're trying to fit the proverbial square peg into the round hole. We will not benefit from the potential of that medical automation holds if we use the current competency framework to train. So I think, even the competencies required, irrespective of what aspect of medicine, whether you're in the interventional or non-interventional space, we need to radically rethink what competencies do physicians require in an automated AI-driven world. The reality is that we're a decade away from these solutions being far better than us. That's the question. So the competencies that are used to define practice today will not be the same in a decade from now. So we need to radically think that. I think, that's my concern. We're using an old paradigm and trying to adapt AI to that. I think it's the wrong way to look at it. We've got to say, well, what is a future physician? What skills do they need? And I don't think we have to be a rocket scientist to conclude that it's going to be dramatically different to the current set.
The ACGME has 6 defined residency competencies, and I've sort of crossed swords with my friends at the ACGME and said, look, exactly that point. You need to rethink the competencies. Mm-hmm. And as you would imagine, that's not an easy transition. So that's one of the barriers. Mm-hmm. Sarthi, do you want to ask your question? You're from India?
Yes. Thank you so much. This discussion is very interesting, and it's my first time attending one of these meetings. I'm Sarthi. I'm dialing in from India, and I just have a very high-level question on everybody's opinions here on how education would be transformed in specialties that are further along the path of AI adoption, such as radiology, because I am a physician and I graduated about 5 or 6 years ago, but I quickly transitioned over to data science, informatics, and eventually a focus in AI. And over those 6 years, I still don't see it being used as much as I had hoped it would. So now I'm helping solve problems for the radiology space, and I would love to hear thoughts on how education would transform adoption as opposed to our current approach, which is to directly target physicians and disrupt their entire workflow with products that don't even have the best accuracy, or maybe managing expectations in that it is still not going to be 100% accurate. There's so much that goes on in the adoption space that I would love to hear about how it would be different if it came from students going forward.
Yeah, thanks for your question. So this brings up the issue of dissemination and implementation of medical technology. I don't care what we're talking about. It could be the latest widget, it could be a drug, it could be AI, it could be whatever. Software is a medical device. And there's a lot of information out there on what are the barriers to dissemination and implementation of a medical technology. This basically has to do with outcomes research, and I'm a little bit involved with that. But anyway, there's a lot of elements. It's everything from how do you get kids vaccinated to how do you get people to adopt and responsibly use artificial intelligence. So maybe Stephen, you're in a leadership position at Columbia, Stephen Ferreira, and you're thinking about integrating this into your curriculum, which, as I understand it, is a nurse practitioner program. So one of the things you have to think about, obviously, is dissemination and implementation. So, Stephen, what are you thinking?
Thanks, Arlen. I think there's a lot of work to do, and I think the good thing is, our school administration, our dean has seen the vision and understands that this is important and needs to be integrated. So I think it's really fortunate that we have that vision at the top, and now the goal is to, integrate it throughout the school. And I just had a session yesterday for faculty, just an intro to AI. So we're starting very, very basic. I started this role in July 1, so it's really new. I've been at the school for 10 years though. First up is our curriculum, finding ways to identify where it fits. And we have some researchers who have been working on natural language models and other technologies. So I'm sort of tapping into their brains and broadcasting it throughout the school. So that's where we see it. Fortunately, on the medical center side, there's a governance structure when it comes to integrating technology into clinical practice, so that anything is going through that perspective. But I'm looking at the curriculum and really trying to get faculty familiar with the tools and the technology, and also have some student counterparts on that side as well.
Gary, you want to comment?
Yeah. Arlen, thank you for me inviting me to the group. Even though I'm not on the panel, I have some observations historically. The group here seems to be focused a great deal on interventional procedures, since most of us may be surgeons. But I think the greater need is in primary care, because the primary care doctors are so overworked and they have to cut corners. They have to see so many patients. I've got so much paperwork to do. So I think AI right now is where EHR was 20 years ago. It's just in its infancy. And my experience in technology is when I retired, I formed the Health Information Exchange in Southern California, before anybody knew what an EHR was and before there was no interoperability. So it's difficult to say where this is going to go. I don't think we know. We might ask AI, where are we going? But that's my comment for now, right now. Thanks for inviting me, Arlen.
Rubin, you wrote a very nice review about your thoughts of AI in medical education, which Rebecca, thanks for posting that in case people want to read it. So my take on this is that there's to make this effective takes sort of action at three levels. One, are the end users, the personal end users, ready to innovate? Two, is the organization ready to innovate? Three, is the system ready to innovate? So, and when I say the system, I mean rules, regulations, legislation, reimbursement, payment, the ecosystem. Because the present sick care ecosystem is not designed to do a lot of things we want it to do to accelerate dissemination and implementation. And you've been pretty proactive in creating an innovation and entrepreneurship program at UAB, which I'm happy to participate in, and thanks very much. And you've written a very nice piece on what are entrepreneurial competencies, much like you alluded to what are AI user competencies. So how do we do this? What needs to happen? Because this is basically about change management at multiple levels.
Yeah, I mean, Arlen, there is no single answer to your question. It's going to have to be a multi-dimensional approach to this. As I said, I'm a very, very strong proponent of going directly to the market with these solutions. Now, in the USA, there are unique barriers to adoption. One is, well, the first one is, are we going to get paid for this? Okay, that's a major barrier, because health systems generally, will be averse to adopting technology that's not remunerated for. That's one of the big things. We're grappling with issues of clinical integration and workflow integration. That's a big issue. And this is, as Sati said, reflected in the fact that most AI implementations at the moment are in silico. They're not widely adopted, except for the ones that are helping with administration, etc. So there are, constraints to this. It's going to require a multi-pronged approach. We could, hypothesize and theorize about any what's right or wrong. If nobody's going to pay for AI, we're just going to struggle for adoption unless we can create a commoditized version of this. And then, by the way, if you look at the most successful AI solutions at the moment, there are solutions that are enabling patients to deliver their own care or parts of this. If you look at chatbots, etc. So from an adoption point of view, those are the most successful. I think, that's an opportunity to reshape the industry. My thing is, if patients are enabled by AI to deliver some portions of their care, they put pressure on the health systems to move faster. So a lot of what I do is actually focused on that. Now, you can call that a business model innovation, but I think that's what's lacking. We're not short of technological innovation in healthcare. We're arguably an industry that has the most robust technological innovation. What we lack is the business model and operating model innovation to go with it. So, this is what we teach. It is, how do you actually think not just about the technology, but think about what is the best business model to couple with this technology. And I think that's a aspect that's lacking.
So Harvey, I want to ask you a question, but I just want to respond a little bit to what you just said. And that is, one of the stakeholders in all of this are obviously healthcare administrators, healthcare leaders. And I teach in an ex-MBA and an MBA health administration program, as well as yours and others. The perspective of healthcare leaders is different than the perspective of other stakeholders. And this conversation really applies as well to healthcare administration, leadership, and education, because we all have to sort of do this together. Mm-hmm. And the reason is because dissemination and implementation, in my view at this point, is a bottom-up, top-down driven process. Mm-hmm. And the reality is, it's really not a question of how do you get your people to use it. The reality is they're already using it. The question is, how do you make that productive and responsible? So Harvey, you've done a lot of work on large language models and implementation and use and et cetera. What are your thoughts about that?
Number one, I always say it's about the culture that you're working with. If I'm in Silicon Valley and I'm showing a really cool AI gadget, I don't even have to explain it. I would almost fair to say that half the audience is either invested or has a friend or already knows the technology. And so with that example, if I'm out in East Texas doing the same demo, I may be shot at, I'm joking, or I may be booed at. And so when I tell startups how to implement, I say we need to start with the Ford. Do not present the limousine, do not show them the Ferrari because the culture is not ready. So we need to take baby steps. So it's more of an assessment going in, what's going on, what can be done, and start with low-hanging fruit. Obviously in education, it's a little different in that they're receptive. They want to see what ideas. From an administrator hat, when I put that one on, I'm looking at costs. How much is this going to cost me, and is it worth it? From the faculty side, then we're kind of on a hard side too, because if the faculty feels threatened to say, you know what, this tool is going to fire me eventually, or it's going to replace me, then I don't want that in my institute. So that's why I say sometimes don't show that limo, show that baby step so that there isn't that threat. The other thing I tell startups is, my favorite phrase is AI plus human is going to beat the best human or the best AI. So introduce that into the product. Make sure that the human's in the loop. That way the human is not threatened so that you can implement quicker.
Hey, Arlen, Sarthi has his hand up. I don't know if it's from before or not.
Yeah, I think, Sarthi, you had your hand up before. Do you have another question, or was that just from before?
No, I do. It's very interesting. So this was about this last topic on on bringing about adoption and presenting the Ford before the limousines. do you think the Fords look different than the limousines when it comes to students as opposed to faculty? I know you already mentioned faculty and administrators, but what would that look like for students?
Gregg, maybe you can answer that question. So, this business of think big, start small, stay small, has to do with, there's two basic reasons you can screw up scaling. You do it too early or you do it too late. And the question is, what's the Goldilocks approach? So in your experience, given all the hats you've worn and continue to wear, what's your advice?
So I think a lot of it aligns with what Rubin is saying. Some of the things that Harvey has said is that the students, in this case, let's talk about just medical students. They've got, a basket full of tools that they're using, but they don't have guidance as to which tool to use for which stuff. So I've got Anki cards and I've got question banks and I've got, a lot of pieces. And I think the way that we've been successful is to present a framework of use and a pathway for what goes first and second. And so what I have found out is with the students that have access to all of these tools, once we provide them with that, regardless of what we're talking about, they actually use less stuff. And they use stuff in an order that fits with their mental model. And I think that's the way to do that, is to start them off with a framework so they get going. And then you can add more stuff. And it's really, you may be adding more Fords, but you're adding more stuff and they have a mechanism of understanding the value.
So sell them a Ford, but gradually increase the options they can buy on a Ford. Okay. Don Smith, you have a perspective of what sounds like a regional ecosystem. Can you give us your 2 cents?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me on the call, and it's been a really great conversation around this. I'm an entrepreneur and the founder here in Birmingham, and what started out as a side project almost was Birmingham AI, and we started out with monthly meetups, and the goal was just to really educate the community about AI and what was coming. We started last June 2023, and we just started out with ChatGPT demos. We will request people from the community to come up and talk about how they were using it at the time and some of the things that they thought that they could share with the community. And that has really resonated. It has allowed the community to approach AI and this next technological paradigm shift in a way where it's not intimidating. It's a way where we can have the community voice and, kind of like the common person, to say, hey, how can AI, be used to better my health or better my business strategies, or even in some degrees, manage some relationships. There's different ways that that AI can be a part of our lives. And so I'm new to the healthcare aspect, and working with Dr. Pillay, I think it's an interesting inflection point, to where if the right approach is taken, then we can actually really blow it up to where, like I said, the community can get involved in how these tools are being, put in place, including the ethics, what are the things that matter to them, so that as we're putting these processes and things in place through AI, the community has a voice in it too, and we can all, kind of make that next step together. So that's what's been working for us, and we're looking to really scale that out. We've just accepted a fellowship from Microsoft. Like I said, we're working with Dr. Pillay as well to really lean into this community-based approach and really see what happens. We still don't know yet, so it's like, I feel like being early, especially as an entrepreneur, it gives you a little wiggle room to experiment, put things out there, see what's gaining traction, see what's not working and what doesn't. And what AI allows us to do is actually absorb all of that data in a way where we can use it to be a little bit more certain about the next steps that we take beyond that, So, and I think conversations like this is part of that. And it's about, hey, what can we do after?
So good for you, and congratulations on what you're doing. This brings up the issue of patient education and community education. And again, how do you disseminate and implement this information to patients or to the patient stakeholder, the care, their community, their family, their care team, their community support, social determinants, that whole care ecosystem on the patient side? How do you do that? So can you go ahead, Rubin?
Arlen, I just want to add, firstly, I want to thank Donald for joining the meeting. I think one of our real innovations at my institute here is developing an organic partnership with community partners. This is arguably the first center for innovation that's going to partner organically with a community-based organization. Donald and his team and his key stakeholders from the community are going to be participating in every aspect of our planning and programmatic execution. Because I think what's always missing from these fora are actually the voice of the community. So, I want to hear from Donald and I want to hear from the community in terms of how they perceive this and what are the right, product mixes and how do we actually, because I think we hypothesize and theorize for the community in terms of what's good and what's bad and what's right and what's wrong. We need them around the table. So Donald and his team are going to be participating in pretty much everything we do at the institution. I would encourage MI10 and everybody that's on here today to make a concerted effort to have community members represented in your decision making. I think that's critical.
Donald, are you still with us?
Yeah, Donaldson.
I am, yes.
Good. Yeah. So then this brings up the issue of equitable access and all kinds of issues with underserved populations, social determinants, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it brings up generational differences. So, for example, probably the most valuable course I took in my education was learning how to type. And it sounds stupid, but it actually is the most important thing I use every day. Well, it turns out that Gen Z doesn't know how to type. So now we're giving them all this stuff to do that requires, in education, responding to stuff that requires you, in most cases, maybe there's voice to text translation, but in most cases, you have to type. Well, if you don't, that could be, forget the access to broadband, forget the digital divide. I'm just saying nuts and bolts of getting stuff done. So how are you addressing that issue and what are you hearing from your community?
And then I think it's one of those things where when you talk about access, you have to consider the barriers to the access as well. So we talk about typing then, but just having a device, to be able to type on. In most smartphones, you have a keyboard, but it's not the same as being on a laptop or computer. Addressing the barriers to it. And right now, because the sweet spot for us has been young professionals, those who are maybe junior level to mid level in their career. Some senior level executives come out as well. But and how I look at how the community can benefit from this is, I think it goes back to infrastructure. And me thinking forward about the possibilities of AI. So when we talk about large language models and small language models, there's a big push right now in the state of Alabama to provide broadband access, to rural areas. They're laying fiber, in all parts of the state and whatnot. So me, if I'm thinking about an experiment and how to take advantage then, but I think there's a way to, as we lay this infrastructure, how can large language models just be part of the base in that, and I say that to say, to kind of set us up for the next 10 years, like Dr. Blake was saying, we won't see the benefits of what we're doing now until 5, 10 years or even longer from now. But if we could be smart about the infrastructure, then I think the community access can start there. We could implement some of these AI infrastructures, in these communities so that as the hardware catches up to the software, because that's kind of where we're at now. The software is, miles ahead of the hardware to be able to take advantage of these large language models and these AI tools. So we focus on the communities and we'll build the infrastructure there. How can we go ahead and get AI into those base systems, into those base infrastructures? And then I think we can back out into, okay, hey, how can we further reduce the barriers? How can we further increase access to these tools, whether it's through, updated Chromebooks or even refurbished Chromebooks that after, that are updated under the software, so I think it's, I think we have to just get granular. And I think with the pace of this technology is moving, we can actually think slow in how we want to do this as we prepare for the future, because I think as we put these things in place over the next few years, it's going to be some rapid improvements.
Right. So I want to, before we wrap this up, because we have about 10 minutes and I want to do like a final thing, but Donald, if there's one thing you wished the people on this call knew from the perspective of a social entrepreneur, community, AI activist, what would it be?
I think it would be to join a community. I think it would be get around people who are curious, even some who are not even aware, but just join a community that are talking to your community about AI and just the possibilities. I think right now, I think it's we deserve to dream. Like, and it's okay to sell the dreams. That, hey, if we take advantage of this, if you learn how to use this now, in 5 years or 3 years, you could be somewhere where you couldn't even imagine. So like sell the dream to your community, because this is where it's at. I'm from a community where when the internet first came about, then there was no way for me to take advantage of it from an entrepreneurial aspect, because I didn't have a laptop. I didn't have a computer. I had a bunch of AOL CDs, but nothing to put them into, and for my community that looked like me then, that was the barrier. And right now, we don't have that. And to your point, right now, some students don't need to talk to these AI models. They can talk to them. And maybe we should start there. And as they're learning these tools, then it's like they can come to their own conclusion. Hey, I actually need to learn how to type. If I want to be a good coder, I need to learn how to type, but I think it's, letting those people come to those conclusions to themselves as they embrace this new technology.
Okay, so we need to wrap this up. So I just want to get some final words from the panel. So Amy, and one question that has been asked by Charmaine is, who's going to standardize the AI curriculum nationwide?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think there's going to need to be some folks certainly coming together. I do think partnerships make it possible. When we look at inspiring the next generation, it's going to be organizations getting together. And I think first defining those competencies around what we expect, and then further standardizing what that's going to look like and moving forward. And I think just to step back to that piece around involvement and engagement around change management, students are curious and they're inspired. And I think if we leverage that with our clinical and community partnerships to be able to create those feedback loops, we can make a big difference by utilizing those in our next generation that want to see things different. So I think they're going to be a big nexus of change, whether that is curriculum or whether that is legislative changes. I think they're going to be the big bridge with our communities. And I think ultimately with our associations that need to be able to come together around policy to be able to create curriculum that's going to change how we do this in education.
Thank you. So Anthony, you've done a really good job of creating ecosystems as instruments of change. You and others have discussed a collaboration, a consortium, a society, call it whatever you want, of people who are interested in this issue of healthcare, AI, education, training, and development. So what do we need to do next to share best practices, to come together as a community, to engage stakeholders at a national or international level?
I always think AI in healthcare is going to be heavily relying on human-to-human connections. And I want to thank Amy for giving me the opportunity to spend a day at her school. There's nothing like doing all of this in person. As convenient as Zoom meetings are, such as this, and it's just not going to replace that three-dimensional touch of human to human. So I think, I was telling Amy that there are 642 astronauts, or less clinicians who are well-versed in this current era of data science and AI education. So I think we need thousands more in this interface to really affect change and transformation in healthcare. I think we'll get there by the end of the decade, but the future is not going to magically arrive, and we're going to have to push our way to the future. And I put in the chat, Arlen, the biggest misconception with students as well as clinicians is that they need to learn programming to get into this domain. The good news is that the timing is better than ever before, that you actually don't have to suffer through years of programming to be in this domain as before, for a number of reasons, because of automated tools are available, and also we just need clinicians with clinical wisdom to be in this game. So this is absolutely the best time to get involved and to get other people involved and create this transformative force in healthcare that we so badly need. I cannot imagine a future in healthcare with very little interface with AI in the next decade or two, at a time that lifespans are decreasing for the first time in our society. So it's a tremendous opportunity for us, and hopefully we will be able to capture that resource and really use it for good.
Okay, so Gary's ideas, annual meetings of specialty groups and AMA should have a breakout session. Actually, many meetings now. I mean, they're too numerous to name, including, incidentally, and a shameless plug for AI Med in Orlando in November. The link is in the chat. Whether it's the AMA, a specialty society, an industry group, a biotech group, I mean, AI is sucking all the oxygen out of every event. You can't get away from it. So a lot of that is happening. But in terms of special interest groups of AI educators, not so much. So Rubin, you've done some, I mean, you have a conference every year, right? So yeah, that's what you're doing, right?
Yeah. And, it's AI literacy is a core mission of the Institute. And, so we host a host of programming. We have actually 2 symposia a year focused on this. I just want to add, the marketplace for AI education is not a homogeneous market. There are different subsegments to the market that are interested in different levels of competencies and skills, and the channels that are best for them are different. So we shouldn't approach this as people who require this are a homogeneous group. We've got to really be able to segment the marketplace and offer the right products to the right through the right channel for the right group of people. I think that's key to success.
Gregg, you have some final thoughts?
Yeah, I think number one, I drive a car. I have no idea how the car works, but I drive the car. I've been provided with some guidance. And so I think that's a group of the people involved with AI. My coding is embarrassing. The second thing is the education that is being provided at all these specialty groups, I'm not talking about the AI specific ones, are not using evidence-based education. They're always, well, let's talk about ELISA. And they never get past AI 101. They never get into the practical hands-on pieces. And I think there is a science of education. It's just right now the educators in AI have not been trained in that. Aside from the change management, it's just you need to get further. And I don't mean into programming. I mean, how do I drive my car? And I think that's much needed in all of these non-informatics based education stuff.
Great. Well, we're going to call this a day. I really want to thank everybody's input, terrific perspectives from different stakeholders, lots of ideas, opportunities, threats, and hopefully we'll continue these conversations and monitor our progress. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.